Good evening, and welcome to tonight's presentation, From the Quarries, an archive of Masonic lore. There have been thousands of eminent personages who have adorned the lodges of speculative Freemasonry since the establishment of the Grand Lodge of England in 1717. Tonight, we will look at just 7 of them, each one a leader in their respective fields, and each one a proud seeker of Masonic light. If you stay to the end, we will introduce an 8th eminent character, who, although fictional, was no less a Freemason for all that he didn't exist. Few men ever became such a symbol of American ruggedness, bravery, and swagger as John Wayne. He was a larger-than-life figure, appearing in 179 film and television productions across a 30-year career and becoming one of the biggest Hollywood stars of the 20th century. Off the screen, John Wayne the Freemason was devoted to the craft, finding comfort in the lodge with his brethren. Through his accomplishments as an actor and a Mason, he left his mark on countless lives, changing the film industry forever. John Wayne was a lifelong participant in fraternal societies. A member of De Molay in high school, John Wayne would go on to become a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, a Shriner, and receive several De Molay honours before his death in 1979. Throughout his life, he evidenced individual self-determination and strength of character, honouring himself and the craft by his conduct. A strong believer in equality, he once remarked that within the lodge was the only place he felt he wasn't being held up on a pedestal. John Wayne was born Marion Morrison in Winterset, Iowa on the 26th of May, 1907. According to a news article in the Winterset Madisonian, Wayne was 13 pounds at birth. In 1916, the family moved to Glendale, California. After moving to Glendale, Wayne attended Wilson Middle School. Every day on his way to school, he passed the local firehouse with his pet terrier, Duke. One of the local firemen started calling Wayne Little Duke. Wayne preferred just Duke, and the name stuck for the rest of his life. In high school, Wayne played for the Glendale High School Championship team. He was also very active with the local chapter of the Order of De Molay. For college, Wayne applied to the United States Naval Academy, but was not accepted. He did attend the University of Southern California on an athletic scholarship. Unfortunately, however, he broke his collarbone, which ended his athletic career. It also ended his scholarship. With no funds available for school, he left USC. His coach, who had been giving Tom Mix tickets to USC games, asked Mix and director John Ford to give Wayne a job as a prop boy and extra. Wayne quickly started appearing as an extra in many films. He also met Wyatt Earp, who was friends with Mix. Wayne later credited Earp with giving him his walk, talk, and persona. In 1930, Wayne was cast in the movie The Big Trail. The director felt Wayne needed a better stage name. He first suggested Anthony Wayne to a student executive who rejected it. The director then suggested John Wayne. It was approved by the studio executive. It is important to note that Wayne himself was never present for any of the discussions involving his stage name. The Big Trail was a groundbreaking film of the new era in sound movies, and it is highly regarded by modern critics. Unfortunately, it was a box office flop at the time, as most theatres did not have the equipment to show the 70mm format film it was shot in. Throughout the 1930s, Wayne starred in a series of B-movie westerns. It wasn't until 1939 when John Ford gave him a starring role in the movie Stagecoach, which was a critical and financial success. The film propelled Wayne to becoming a mainstream star. When World War II broke out, Wayne was declared too old for service. He was 34. He was also classified 3A, family deferment. Wayne wanted to be reclassified, allowing him to serve in the war. Republican studios, which held his contract, threatened to sue him if he were to leave to enlist. By many accounts, not being able to serve was one of the most painful experiences of Wayne's life. His widow suggested in later years he became a super patriot due to the guilt he felt for not serving during the war. Throughout the 1940s, 50s and into the 1960s, Wayne worked with director John Ford on more than 20 films. One of the more notable films was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance in 1962. In the film, Wayne, for the first time, calls another character Pilgrim. In 1969, Wayne won the Best Actor Oscar for his role in True Grit. It was his second time being nominated. The first came 17 years earlier. In 1976, Wayne appeared in his final film, The Shootist. In the film, Wayne portrayed J.P. Brooks, a man dying of cancer, a disease Wayne himself passed away from 3 years later. Wayne was a member of the Marion McDaniel Lodge No. 56 in Tucson, Arizona. He became a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason, a member of York Rite, and joined Al Malaika Shrine Temple in Los Angeles. War is widely and rightly regarded as hell. Almost always unnecessary, brutal, and degrading to all of humanity, war is also the ultimate proving ground of human character. It is only in the face of death and destruction that an individual's philosophical convictions can be truly tested. Only with such extreme consequences and high stakes at risk can the will really triumph. Freemasonry prepares its initiates for conflict. Though most Masons will never see a battlefield, Freemasonry itself presents its members with the tools necessary to fight the battles that inevitably arise in every human life. One such Masonic warrior, both philosophically and in his worldly life, was General Douglas MacArthur. Dubbed the American Shogun by his enemies, Douglas MacArthur was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1880 and raised in West Texas. Valedictorian of the West Texas Military Academy and member of a well-established military family, MacArthur was destined for the battlefield from an early age. MacArthur served in the United States Army for several decades before retiring. While stationed in the Philippines, MacArthur was made a Mason at sight by the Grand Master of the Philippines, an incredibly high honour reserved for exceptional cases. He was raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason on the 14th of January 1936 and had received the 32nd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite by March the 28th of that same year. Despite his numerous duties, MacArthur managed to maintain an active Masonic career. MacArthur's military career, however, did not end with his retirement, as he was recalled to service when the United States was threatened by Japanese forces in the latter half of the Second World War. MacArthur was tasked with retaking the Philippine Islands, a nation he had come to love over his many years of service there, and confronting the Japanese forces in the Pacific Theatre. He was eventually successful and was an essential part of the Allied victory. Upon the North Korean invasion of South Korea, he was designated Commander, United Nations Command in the Far East in July 1950. MacArthur was relieved of his command by President Truman in April 1951 for insubordination and disobedience. This was the cause of significant controversy, not only politically and socially, but also within the craft. At the time of MacArthur's removal, President Harry S. Truman was also a past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri. Before dismissing MacArthur, President Truman consulted with his advisors, which included Generals George C. Marshall, who was Secretary of Defense at the time, and Omar N. Bradley, who was Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In December of 1941, George Marshall had been made a Mason at sight by the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. Omar Bradley had been raised in West Point Lodge No. 877, Highland Falls, New York, in 1923. The recommendation to dismiss General MacArthur was unanimous. It was not the best of times for the craft. Douglas MacArthur was relieved by Lieutenant General Matthew B. Ridgway, who was also a Freemason. Like Bradley, he was a member of West Point Lodge No. 877 and was raised on May 1st, 1924. In a 2002 BBC poll, former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was named as the greatest ever Briton. He is an incredibly popular figure in the United Kingdom for his gallant leadership of the Allies during the Second World War. Many of Churchill's speeches have been preserved as national British treasures, and his impact on the British never say die bulldog attitude is undisputed. While everyone remembers Churchill as the man who dared go up against Hitler, fewer people realise that he was, in fact, a proud Freemason, and drew upon his membership of the fraternity throughout his successful life. Considering his many accomplishments, it isn't easy to encapsulate Brother Churchill's remarkable life in one moment. He led England through the horror and tragedy of World War II and beyond, yet much of his story was written before he assumed his position as Prime Minister. Churchill was one of a kind, a strong personality and fearless leader who took the weight of the world upon his shoulders in its darkest hour. Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was born on November 30th, 1874 in Oxfordshire, England. His family descended from the Duke of Marlborough, residing at the top of the English aristocracy. He attended the Harrow School as a boy, quickly taking an avid interest in English and writing. At 21, he enlisted as second lieutenant in the 4th Queen's Own Hussars Cavalry Regiment, thus beginning what would become a long and storied career as a serviceman. Over the next several years, Churchill hardly stayed in one location long. He travelled to Cuba, New York, and then India. While in India, Winston served as a soldier and a journalist. He then moved to the Sudan in 1898, serving under General Kitchener in the 21st Lancers, while doubling as a journalist for the Morning Post. Although still a young man, by 1899, Winston had gained a lifetime of experience. He was only 25, but ready to begin his journey in English politics. That year he returned to Britain and was elected into Parliament. Charming, passionate and quick-witted, Churchill enjoyed a meteoric rise in the English government. Few boasted such a strong personality, and in 1904 he crossed the aisle in the House of Commons, ditching the Conservative Party in opposition to the Aliens Bill, which aimed to deter Jewish migration into Britain. The House would prove too small, and he ascended from post to post over the next 10 years. By the onset of the First World War, Churchill had foreseen a conflict with Germany. Having spent a few years leading the Admiralty, he had strengthened the British Navy in preparation for war. As the fighting began, Winston resigned his post, re-enlisted in the army, and held several positions, including the Minister of Munitions. Here he led the research and development efforts for the tank, a weapon that proved vital to deciding the outcome of the war. Unlike his predecessor, Neville Chamberlain, Churchill had viewed Hitler and the Nazis' ascent to power as a looming threat. In response to England joining the Munich Agreement with Hitler in 1938, Churchill described the move as a total and unmitigated defeat. It took only a year for Britain to be dragged into war against Germany. After the war began, Chamberlain did not last long as the Premier. Churchill, however, was now among one of the most powerful men in government. With his many years of military and government experience, few were as well positioned to lead Britain during the war. He became Prime Minister by forming an all-party government in 1940 and immediately pursued an aggressive campaign against the Nazis. As the battle for Britain raged, the world witnessed some of Churchill's finest moments as a leader, inspiring his countryfolk with stirring speeches over the radio. Over the next 4 years, the Prime Minister was essential in leading the Allies to victory against the Nazi regime. He refused to negotiate or surrender despite the long, dark hours, knowing the stakes were too high for his country. It was the most significant conflict the world had known. Yet, his bravery, charisma, and military genius were unprecedented and made him precisely the right man for what was, in the moment, the world's most formidable job. Several years after the war, Winston was again elected to Prime Minister in 1951. Now in his late 70s, his health began to fail, and he retired in 1955, living out his final years at home and dying in 1965. Queen Elizabeth decreed him a state funeral at St. Paul's Cathedral in honour of his innumerable achievements. Indeed, it is staggering to consider his many struggles, achievements, and triumphs. That one man could achieve so much and strive to live a life of integrity is exceptional. He earned a Nobel Prize for Literature and 37 orders, decorations, medals, and countless honours. Churchill was initiated into Studham Lodge No. 1591 in May 1901 at the age of 26. He completed his second degree 2 months later and was made a Master Mason on the 5th of March 1902. It is said that Churchill was motivated to join the lodge because he had many friends and family members who were Masons, and Freemasonry at the time was an incredibly popular and well-respected institution for men of good social standing. We can also point to Churchill's membership of other fraternities as an indication of his interest in the benefits of connecting with like-minded men in his community. In 1904, he accepted an honorary membership in the Hawthorne Lodge of the British Order of Ancient Free Gardeners. He is also recorded as a member of the Loyal Waterloo Lodge of the National Independent Order of Oddfellows, as well as a member of the Ancient Order of Druids. It is clear that Churchill's attraction to fraternal institutions likely inspired him to become a Mason. Studham Lodge itself has a storied history. For instance, the guest list of the Lodge's 21st installation banquet in 1897 included 17 members of Parliament and numerous earls, knights, and lords who would have ensured the night was most spectacular. It appears no coincidence that Winston Churchill joined a lodge with such highly regarded social standing, as he probably would have believed that the connections he developed within would help him further his political career. It was only after initiation that he would have learned the true benefits that Masonry has to offer. Throughout history, Freemasonry has been the centre of much occult controversy. While a majority of Masons do not dabble in magic, there has been a handful that have, including one of the world's most famous magicians and escape artists, Harry Houdini. Born on March 24, 1874 as Erich Weiss in Budapest, Hungary, he was the son of the Rabbi Meyer Weiss and Cecilia Steiner. Weiss came to the United States in July of 1878 with his mother and 4 brothers. The family changed the spelling of their last name to W-E-I-S-S from W-E-I-S-Z, and Eric, E-R-I-K, became Erich, E-H-R-I-C-H, to match German spellings. The Weiss family lived in Appleton, Wisconsin, until 1882, when Eric and his father moved to New York City. It was in New York that he had his first taste of public showmanship at the age of 9, when he found work as a trapeze artist. He wouldn't start his magic career until 1891. In 1891, Houdini began performing in a tent act with a strongman named Émile Jarreau. On the side, he performed at sideshows, dime museums, and doubled as the Wilde Man at a circus. He began by focusing on card tricks, but eventually started experimenting with escape acts. His career gained momentum in 1899 when he met his manager, Martin Beck. After dazzling Beck with handcuff acts, he was booked into the Orpheum vaudeville circuit. Shortly after that, he started performing at the biggest vaudeville houses in the country. In 1900, he began a European tour, and after several unsuccessful interviews, he was booked at the Alhambra Theatre in London for 6 straight months. This success came from his ability to baffle Scotland Yard by escaping their handcuffs several times. After his success in Europe, the career of Harry Houdini began to reach almost mythical proportions. In 1906, he created his own publication, The Conjurer's Monthly Magazine, which only lasted 2 volumes, due to Houdini using it to attack his rivals and praise himself. From 1907 to 1910, he enjoyed a wildly successful run of performances across the United States. During this time, he focused less on handcuff acts and more on escaping from locked cages and boxes. It was around this time that Houdini performed some of his most famous stunts, such as the suspended straitjacket escape, a buried alive stunt, and the mirror challenge. Aside from being a world-renowned escape artist, Harry Houdini has several other credits to his name. He starred in several movies for famous players, Lasky Corporation, Paramount Pictures, namely The Grim Game in 1919 and Terror Island in 1920. After the completion of these films, Houdini returned to New York and opened his own film production company, the Houdini Picture Corporation. He starred in 2 films for his own company, The Man from Beyond in 1921 and Haldane of the Secret Service in 1923. He was also a skilled and notable aviator, and in the 1920s he took up the hobby of debunking and exposing fraudulent spiritualists, a hobby that made him less than popular in certain circles. Houdini was a member of St. Cecile Lodge No. 568 in New York City. He was raised a Master Mason on the 21st of August 1923. On October the 30th, 1923, he became a life member, and on October 31st, 1926, he became a member of the Mecca Shrine Temple in New York City. Brother Houdini passed away on October 31st, 1936, due to complications with peritonitis. He is interred in Machpelah Cemetery in Glendale, Queens. His gravesite is maintained to this day by the Society of American Magicians, an organization that Houdini willed a large sum of money to. Freemasonry has had its fair share of famous brothers since its inception in the early 18th century. But perhaps the standout figure in the fraternity's history in the United States is the first President of the United States, George Washington. George Washington joined the Masonic Lodge in Fredericksburg, Virginia at the tender age of 20 in 1752. During the War for Independence, he attended various Masonic celebrations and ceremonies in different states. He was also influential in the formation of Masonic lodges that was started by army regiments. At his inauguration in 1791, Washington took his oath on a Bible at St. John's Lodge in New York. Such was his allegiance to Freemasonry. Moreover, during his 2 terms as President of the United States, he toured the country, visiting Masonic lodges and interacting with brothers, most notably in the Carolinas. Most famously, President Washington presided over the cornerstone laying ceremony at the US Capitol building in 1793, a proud moment in Masonic history. This event has also been the catalyst for many conspiracy theorists who believe that such an event is evidence that the Masons control the US government. After his presidency, Washington became Charter Master of Alexandra Lodge 22, where he famously sat for a portrait in Masonic regalia. Such was Washington's commitment to Freemasonry, he was buried with Masonic honours. George Washington was born in Westmoreland, Virginia, and grew up within a thriving planting community. Washington's grandfather originally emigrated to America from England and accumulated 5,000 acres of land, which helped support his family. Washington wasn't formally educated as a young boy, but was homeschooled and received additional lessons from a local church officer. Despite not attending school, Washington managed to learn various subjects, including mathematics, geography, and Latin, and so showed signs of his educational prowess from a young age. As has been mentioned, Washington became a Mason at the age of 20. Records show that the first recorded meeting at the Fredericksburg Lodge, where Washington would become a member, was on September 1, 1752. Washington was initiated as an entered apprentice at the lodge in a ceremony on November 4th of the same year. He paid £2 3 shillings to become a member of the lodge. On March 3rd, 1753, he passed to the degree of a fellow craft mason and was raised to the sublime degree of a master mason on August 4th of the same year. Washington was fiercely loyal to the lodge in Fredericksburg throughout his life, which was renamed Fredericksburg Lodge No. 4 after the creation of the Grand Lodge of Virginia in 1778. Although he became a Mason in 1752, it wasn't until later in life that Washington really began attending Masonic ceremonies frequently. From 1778, it is recorded that he attended many Masonic functions across the United States. For example, on the 24th of June 1779, Washington attended the American Union Lodge's celebration of the Feast of St. John the Baptist. This meeting was significant, as it allowed Washington to meet with many of the officers and enlisted men within the Connecticut regiments. There is also a record of Washington visiting King Solomon's Lodge in Poughkeepsie, New York, in December of 1783. Throughout the war, Washington traveled throughout the states, meeting Masons and sharing stories. Once the war had ended, Washington accepted his friend's invitation to attend a banquet at Alexandria Lodge No. 39 in June of 1784. After the ceremony, Washington was elected as an honorary member of the lodge. In 1788, Washington agreed to be the charter master of the lodge when it transferred its allegiance from the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania to the Grand Lodge of Virginia. During his time at this lodge, Washington was painted in full Masonic regalia, and after his death, the lodge changed its name to Alexandria Washington Lodge No. 22. When tensions finally broke out into conflict between the British Crown and the American colonies, Washington was chosen to be the Commander-in-Chief of all colonial forces. After a long and brutal conflict, the American colonies under Washington's command defeated the British and won their independence. He retired to the fields of Mount Vernon after years of long battle and service to his people. Yet he was called up for service one more time and was elected as the first President of the United States by unanimous decision. As President, Washington tried to ensure peace and build the nation's capital. After Washington was inaugurated as President in 1789, there is a significant record of his dealings and correspondence with many Masonic local lodges and state Grand Lodges. Such was his enthusiasm and passion for Freemasonry. Washington's most significant act as a Mason occurred whilst he was President of the US. On September 18, 1793, he presided at the Masonic ceremonial laying of the United States Capitol cornerstone. When Washington was laid to rest in 1799, Brothers of Alexandria Lodge performed Masonic rites. While there have been many prominent Masons throughout history, perhaps none have been as significant as George Washington. As the first President of the United States and the founder of the nation's capital, Washington is arguably the most influential American of all time. The fact that he was a Mason is essential, as it helped shape his ideals as a man and as a leader. He wrote eloquently about his commitment to Freemasonry, and his attendance at several Masonic ceremonies throughout his life indicates the high regard with which he held his Masonic responsibilities. Davy Crockett remains one of the best-known American folk heroes. Although commonly referred to in popular culture as King of the Wild Frontier, he was so much more. He served as a congressman representing Tennessee and was also a key figure in the Texas Revolution and died at the Battle of the Alamo. Davy Crockett was born on August 17, 1786, in Greene County, Tennessee. His father, having little means, hired him out to more prosperous backwoods farmers, and Davy's schooling amounted to 100 days of tutoring with a neighbour. Successive moves west to Middle Tennessee brought him close to the area of the Creek War, in which he made a name for himself from 1813 to 1815. In 1821, he was elected to the Tennessee legislature, winning popularity through campaign speeches filled with yarns and homespun metaphors. In the legislature, an opposing speaker referred to Crockett as the gentleman from the cane, an allusion to the dense canebrakes of western Tennessee, where Davy hunted bears and raccoons during the winter. This image of the rough, backwoods legislator caught the popular imagination during Crockett's lifetime and continued to do so after his death. His larger-than-life exploits were in fact chronicled during his own lifetime and continue to this day to be celebrated in American culture. After serving as a colonel in the Tennessee militia and a stint in the state legislature, he was ultimately elected to the US Congress in 1826. It was during his tenure in Washington that Crockett was initiated into Freemasonry and became a Master Mason. Proof of this exists only because he entrusted his Masonic apron, which was made for him by Mrs. W.C. Massey while in office, to the sheriff of Weakley County. The Weakley Lodge, of which Crockett is said to have been a member, burned during the Civil War, which destroyed all of its contents and records. However, the apron remains unharmed today, it having been inherited and preserved by the sheriff's nephew. Although initially elected to Congress as a staunch supporter of President Andrew Jackson, who was also a Freemason, Crockett came to oppose several of Jackson's initiatives, which eventually caused him to lose his seat in Congress due to the popularity of the president. Not one to retire quietly, Crockett immediately took up the cause of Texas independence and set out with a company of men from his Tennessee home in November of 1835. Before leaving, he entrusted his Masonic apron to his local lodge, where it remains to this day. His daughter Matilda later recalled the last time she saw her father. He was dressed in his hunting suit, wearing a coonskin cap, and carried a fine rifle presented to him by friends in Philadelphia. He seemed very confident the morning he went away that he would soon have us all join him in Texas. This, unfortunately, was never to be. Crockett arrived in Texas after a 2-month journey and immediately enlisted as a volunteer. Just a few short weeks later, he arrived at the Alamo in San Antonio just before the epic battle against the Mexican army of Santa Anna. A large number of the co-defenders of the Alamo were also Freemasons, as was, ironically enough, Santa Anna himself. Davy Crockett lost his life in that battle, along with scores of other brave men. And although the exact circumstances of Crockett's death are unclear, it is known among scholars that brother David Crockett was called from labour on the morning of the 6th of March 1836 at the age of 49. Today, no one will deny the genius of Oscar Wilde. Yet during his own lifetime, he was spurned and humiliated, in spite of the success of much of his work. He was a victim of the society into which he was born. The Victorian middle class, whose sacred institutions of morality Wilde was to infringe, simply had no patience or tolerance for him. The saddest of the tragedies that Wilde was to write could not match the events that were to unfold, and Freemasonry, which did play a significant part during his time at Oxford, was also to reject him and let him down. Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde was born in Dublin, Ireland, on the 16th of October 1854, and from a young age showed all the promise of becoming an impressive academic. In 1871, he was admitted into Trinity College, Dublin University, and won the scholarship, which catapulted him directly from Ireland to Magdalen College, Oxford, in October of 1874. He was barely 20 years old. Talent and intellect attract powerful friends, and Oscar Wilde, a brilliant undergraduate by any standards, was befriended by various individuals of consequence who influenced his future in many ways. Amongst them were Walter Pater, John Addington Symonds, and John Ruskin. He was also very likely to have been on friendly terms with Prince Leopold, sixth son of Queen Victoria, and this acquaintance will have encouraged his introduction to Freemasonry. Oscar would have felt on familiar ground when, in February 1875, his colleague, John Edward Courtney Bodley, an undergraduate at Balliol College who had only been initiated the year before, approached him with a view to his joining Apollo University Lodge No. 357. Bodley was much involved with Masonic administration, responsible for several fetes and balls, and was appointed the junior secretary of the Apollo University Lodge, director of ceremonies of the Churchill Lodge, and later became the provincial grand secretary for Oxfordshire. On the 16th of February 1875, Oscar was proposed in the Apollo University Lodge by Sinclair Franklin Hood of Magdalen College and seconded by J.E.C. Bodley. The ballot proved in his favour. Being underage, Oscar was initiated by special dispensation on Tuesday the 23rd of February. Because the Oxford and Cambridge University lodges, Apollo University and Isaac Newton respectively, enjoy blanket dispensation which is automatically renewed annually to initiate candidates under the age of 21, there are no records in Grand Lodge for dispensation applications for individual candidates. Oscar Wilde's Craft and Rose Choir certificates, together with considerable other memorabilia, were acquired by various individuals in the mid-1900s. When Vivian Holland, Oscar's impoverished son, sadly had to sell off his personal items to survive financially. Oscar took his Freemasonry seriously and was a keen and active participant in lodge affairs. Having been passed to the second degree on the 24th of April and made a Master Mason on the 25th of May, 1875, he joined Churchill Lodge in November of the same year, although he was not present at the meeting in which his membership was announced. He acted as Chamberlain, an office that no longer exists, as well as Raphael, which would have entailed his conducting the candidates in the perambulations during the perfection ceremony. He introduced 4 new members to the order, all from Magdalen College. Oscar Wilde, within the confines of Masonic ambience, was in his element. Unfortunately, the order seems also to have brought out in Oscar his extravagant streak and a tendency to overspend, which did cause him some embarrassment. In November of 1876, he spent a total of £15, 18 shillings and sixpence, a vast amount at the time, to purchase from George Henry Osmond watch and clockmakers various items which included 18-carat gold and ivory studs, a lambskin rose choir apron and collar, a rose choir jewel and sword, and belt, as well as a Masonic leather jewel case, lettered with his initials O.F. O.F.W.W. He only paid off £10 on account, and Osmond's solicitors, Messrs. Morrell, Peel and Gamlin, sued a year later for the remainder. Whereas Oscar's membership of the Apollo University Lodge ceased in 1878 due to non-payment of dues, his demise from the Churchill Lodge was a more deliberate expulsion. In 1881, the secretary to the lodge decided on an efficiency drive to collect arrears of subscriptions due to the lodge. Amongst the 11 members who were finally excluded in 1883 was Oscar Wilde. Wilde's fate is recorded in the lodge minutes for the 4th of June 1883. Brother Crowder, secretary, proposed, and Brother G.L. Hawkins seconded that the expulsion from the order of Brother Oscar Wilde be reported to Grand Lodge, he having failed to acknowledge the 3 previous communications forwarded to him. This was carried unanimously. The expulsion from the Churchill Lodge effectively sealed and ended Oscar Wilde's Masonic activities. He had not yet been disgraced by society, and the action taken against him in the Churchill Lodge and the remainder of the orders from which he was finally excluded appear to have been a matter of neglect on his part, rather than deliberate action taken against him. By September of 1880, Oscar Wilde had divested himself from both Roman Catholicism and any overt interest in Freemasonry. Having left Oxford for London in 1878 with the self-proclaimed title of Professor of Aesthetics, he was soon on world tours covering the USA and Canada. The next decade was spent with Wilde balanced on that fine dividing line between what was and what was not morally acceptable to late Victorian London society. At the height of his fame and success, while the importance of being earnest was still being performed in London, Wilde prosecuted the Marquess of Queensberry for criminal libel. The Marquess was the father of Wilde's lover, Lord Alfred Douglas. The libel trial unearthed evidence that caused Wilde to drop his charges and led to his own arrest and trial for gross indecency with men. After 2 more trials, he was convicted and sentenced to 2 years' hard labour, the maximum penalty, and was jailed from 1895 to 1897. In 1895, the Masonic fraternity would have been aware, though unperturbed by Oscar Wilde's sad and tragic circumstances. He had, after all, ceased membership of the last of the Masonic orders in 1879, and had left Freemasonry behind that same year when he went down from Oxford. However, his name was still erased from Masonic records in Oxford. Regulation 11 of the order provides that any member being convicted of felony or crime, whatever its nature, shall be deprived of all Masonic rights and privileges, namely, expelled from the order. Thus, Oscar Wilde's expulsion was in line with this regulation, irrespective of the nature of the act for which the imprisonment was served. On his release from prison in May 1897, Oscar Wilde made his way directly to Dieppe. He was to spend the last 3 years of his life in exile in France. Oscar died in his room at the Hotel d'Alsace on the 30th of November 1900, diagnosed as having suffered from cerebral meningitis. He was 46 years old.
John McMurdo,
said the voice.
Are you already a member of the ancient order of freemen?
He bowed in assent.
Is your lodge number 29 Chicago?
He bowed again.
Dark nights are unpleasant,
said the voice.
Yes, for strangers to travel.
He answered.
The clouds are heavy.
Yes, a storm is approaching.
Are the brethren satisfied?
Asked the bodymaster. There was a general murmur of assent.
We know, brother, by your sign and by your countersign, that you are indeed one of us. We would have you know, however, that in this country and in other countries of these parts, we have certain rights and also certain duties of our own which call for good men. Are you ready to be tested?
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's presentation, From the Quarries, an archive of Masonic lore.
In Beaton's Christmas Annual of 1887, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle presented to the public A Study in Scarlet, his first Sherlock Holmes story. From this beginning, there followed 56 short stories and 3 novels, with Sherlock Holmes and his Boswell, John H. Watson, M.D., as the principal characters. From the canon, as the short stories and novels are referred to by Sherlockians, there have emerged writings upon every topic imaginable, including references to Freemasonry. Arthur Charles Ignatius Conan Doyle was born on the 22nd of May 1859 at Picardy Place, Edinburgh, the son of Charles Doyle and Mary Foley. He was the first in a family which included 3 sisters and a brother. The father, Charles Doyle, was a civil servant and an artist who was unworldly and impracticable, and his family suffered because of it. His mother was the guiding force in the family and in Conan Doyle's life. Of his boyhood, Conan Doyle recalls that it was Spartan. At the age of 10, he was sent to Hodder, where the boys were prepared for entry to Stonyhurst, a prominent public school in Lancashire. When he was ready to pursue his higher education, it was decided that he should enter medical school at Edinburgh University. He entered in 1876 and graduated with the degree of Bachelor of Medicine in 1881. As part of his medical studies, he spent 7 months as a surgeon on the whaling ship Hope in the Arctic in 1880. After taking his medical degree, Doyle sailed to South Africa for 4 months as the ship's doctor aboard the Mayumba. Conan Doyle married Louise Hawkins in 1885. From that union were born 2 children. His wife, whom he called Tui, died of tuberculosis in 1906 after a 13-year illness, and despite recuperative treatment at several locations. In 1907, he married Jean Leckie, and there were 3 children in that marriage. Conan Doyle is reported to have been able to write his stories in a variety of situations and circumstances. For example, while riding on a train, or in a room full of people, and his handwritten manuscripts indicate they required very little revision. Although he is best known for the Holmes canon, Conan Doyle considered himself to be an historical novelist, and that is where his primary interest lay. Among many such works from his pen were Micah Clarke, The Firm of Girdleston, The White Company, and The Refugees. He also wrote many short stories, including those about Brigadier Gerard and Sir Nigel, and others on themes of mystery and terror. There is a further collection entitled Round the Red Lamp, which relates to his medical practice, and the Stark Munro Letters, which are autobiographical in character. But his real autobiography was Memories and Adventures. He was quite irritated that his detective stories received more attention than his other work. In 1923 he wrote, "I believe that if I had never touched Holmes, who tended to obscure my higher work, my position in literature would, at the present moment, be a more commanding one." Indeed, Conan Doyle became so disenchanted with Sherlock Holmes that in The Final Problem, written in 1893, Holmes was killed in a fall over the Reichenbach Falls in Switzerland, while in deadly combat with Professor Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime and his arch-enemy. Holmes' death dismayed readers so much that letters of complaint poured in. In one, a lady addressed the author as "you brute," and even his mother begged him not to kill Holmes. Some men wore black armbands in mourning. In 1903, Holmes was restored to life in The Adventure of the Empty House. From August 1901 until April 1902, The Hound of the Baskervilles appeared in serial form in the Strand magazine. But Conan Doyle remained adamant that Holmes was dead, and this was a previously unchronicled case. He was also a prolific writer on various topics of current interest, and wrote innumerable letters to the press. He was responsible for introducing downhill skiing into Switzerland, the introduction of metal helmets for combat soldiers, and the inflatable life preserver for sailors. He was also an energetic champion of divorce reform, and was one of the first proponents of a tunnel connecting England and France. Although he was too old for active service in World War I, he was actively engaged in the war effort on the home front, and wrote and spoke about the hostilities. Arthur Conan Doyle was initiated on the 26th of January 1887 at the age of 27, passed on the 23rd of February 1887, and raised on the 23rd of March 1887 in Phoenix Lodge, number 257, Southsea, Hampshire. He resigned in 1889 and rejoined in 1902, but finally withdrew in 1911 without having made further progress in the craft. The records of the United Grand Lodge of England contain no indication of his having affiliated with any other lodge. The October 1901 edition of Masonic Illustrated, page 29, indicates that Conan Doyle attended a lodge at Bloemfontein with Rudyard Kipling during the Boer War. Upon his return home the same year, he was made an honorary member of the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel No. 1, in Edinburgh. This membership was conferred upon him when he accepted an invitation to speak at a Burns Night dinner. In this speech, he confirmed many reports which had been received of the value of Freemasonry on the battlefield. Prisoners on both sides, when found to be Freemasons, were invariably treated with more courtesy and consideration than would otherwise have been the case. The name Sherlock Holmes conjures up images of Victorian England, swirling fog, and a tall, thin detective with a deerstalker hat, magnifying glass, and a pipe with a curved stem. For Sherlockians he lives, and their writings have produced voluminous comments upon the man. Vincent Starrett, a leading Sherlockian in the private life of Sherlock Holmes, observed that the existence of Sherlock Holmes is, however, something more than a matter of mere faith. That he emerged from the pages of a book may be a concern for scholarly regard, but it can hardly be denied that he has taken his place in the living world. It is reported that the French General Humbert, famous in World War I, asked of Conan Doyle,
Sherlock Holmes, est-ce qu'il est un soldat dans l'armée anglaise?
Is Sherlock Holmes a soldier in the English army? There was an embarrassing moment, and then Doyle replied,
Mais mon général, il est trop vieux pour le service.
But, General, he is too old for active service. We will use two examples of references to Freemasonry in Conan Doyle's work. The Adventure of the Musgrave Ritual, first published in the Strand Magazine, 1893. Reginald Musgrave, an acquaintance of Holmes, asked him to apply those powers with which he used to amaze us to something strange and inexplicable in his ancestral home in Sussex. The butler, who had been given notice of his dismissal for prying into family affairs, had disappeared without a trace, and Holmes was retained to find him. During the investigation, Holmes took possession of a ritual which had been in the Musgrave family for generations. He used it to locate both the missing butler and an ancient crown of King Charles I of England. The document, which Holmes took into his possession, was described by its owner as the strange catechism to which each Musgrave had to submit when he came to man's estate. He read out the questions and answers. Whose was it? His who is gone. Who shall have it? He who will come. Where was the sun? Over the oak. Where was the shadow? Under the elm. How was it stepped? North by 10 and by 10, east by 5 and by 5, south by 2 and by 2, west by 1 and by 1, and so under. What shall we give for it? All that is ours. Why should we give it? For the sake of the trust. Professor J. Macpherson of the University of Toronto is of the opinion that this catechism had its origins in Freemasonry. Barrett G. Potter, in his Sherlock Holmes and the Masonic Connection, also believes that the ritual had its roots in Masonic catechisms used for the instruction of the brethren. The Valley of Fear, first published in the Strand Magazine, 1914. This full-length novel was written by Conan Doyle 3 years after he resigned his membership of Phoenix Lodge. In it, Holmes was called in to investigate the death of John Douglas and his wife at Burleston Manor, Sussex. Among the clues were a card with the symbol VV341 scrawled upon it, and a brand mark on the deceased's arm. The VV341 referred to the ancient order of freemen, the Scourers of Vermissa, Lodge number 341. In the course of the story, lodge proceedings are discussed, and the following ensues with reference to Bertie Edwards, alias John McMurdo.
John McMurdo,
said the voice.
Are you already a member of the ancient order of freemen?
He bowed in assent.
Is your lodge number 29 Chicago?
He bowed again.
Dark nights are unpleasant,
Said the voice.
Yes, for strangers to travel.
He answered.
the clouds are heavy.
Yes, a storm is approaching.
Are the brethren satisfied?
Asked the bodymaster. There was a general murmur of assent.
We know, brother, by your sign and by your countersign that you are indeed one of us. We would have you know, however, that in this country and in other countries of these parts we have certain rights and also certain duties of our own which call for good men. Are you ready to be tested?
This is a catechism somewhat similar to that in the Musgrave Ritual. Other stories with Masonic references are A Study in Scarlet, A Scandal in Bohemia, The Adventures of the Red-Headed League, The Stockbroker's Clerk, The Adventure of the Yellow Face, The Adventure of the Norwood Builder, and The Adventure of the Retired Colourman. Conan Doyle died on the 7th of July 1930 at Crowborough in Sussex, and was buried in the gardens of the family home in Windlesham in Surrey. The headstone was of British oak, and is inscribed only with his name, his date of birth, and the 4 words, "Steel true, blade straight." 18 years earlier, without realizing it, he had written his own epitaph. I have wrought my simple plan if I give 1 hour of joy to the boy who's half a man, or to the man who's half a boy. For a deep dive into the history, philosophy, and traditions of Freemasonry, subscribe to From the Quarries. You will find hundreds of lectures, presentations, shorts, and other Masonic works written by Freemasons for Freemasons. Visit FromTheQuarries.com or YouTube at From the Quarries.